Hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm so excited to have you. I admire you folks for a while with your work in your theater making, but also in your advocacy. And so I'm just so excited to be here. The format of today is pretty organic. I'm going to pose you some questions and hopefully and allow you to just share your own experience as much as you are willing to share. And we'll go from there. At the end, we'll have a little section for the audience to ask you questions. But today, it's all about you. So please go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience, and we will go from there.
Hi, my name is Jessica Whittemore, and my theater stereotype is the dumb, sexy blonde. And I've been fighting that, lucky to be fighting that for almost a decade now, over a decade now. Let's see, I studied environmental justice in school, and I've always been interested in making the world a better place, and I really love theater, and it's given me so much, but it has a lot of problems with it. So I'm just really happy to be here and talking about some ways that we can fix it. All right, Jourdán, now you
Wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. And also, I want to say, Vinh, that likewise, I am a fan of both your work and your advocacy as well. So thank you for this opportunity. Hello, everyone. My name is Jourdán Olivier-Verde. I am an actor, a theater artist, educator. I currently sit on the board of directors for Marin Shakespeare Company, where I'm also the chair of the BIPOC Alliance Council, of which we have some people represented in the audience today. Thank you all. I see you all. And my stereotype, theater stereotype, is usually like either the brute, officer type, the villain. My deep speaking voice lends to villainy pretty well, I think. But I have been branching out myself and trying to play as against type as possible when I can. So that's what I've been doing. I studied theater arts in school and then in conservatory, as well as history. And now I'm currently pursuing my graduate degree in creative writing. So I've been also working on breaking stereotypes by creating new material that breaks that and creating new opportunities. So I'm very excited about this conversation. We've had some previous conversations before, and I've attended some of the other conversations, and they've all been very enlightening. And so I'm very excited about just opening this conversation up with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That makes my heart so happy. We're not only speaking of the existing work, but also the opportunities that come from new works from BIPOC artists and other artists from other marginalized communities. So grateful. Thank you for that. I want to start with a question of, as we all have worked in situation in the theater where we were typecast or were put in roles that we were not quite comfortable with. Can you share any key moments for you of awareness or reaction in your experience, and kind of speak to that when you were pigeonholed into roles or things like that?
I can speak to my most recent theater experience, which was now well over a year ago. At the lovely SBMT, playing Ilona Ritter in She Loves Me, who is the sexy dumb blonde in that show. And with those sorts of parts, there's always a line that makes the audience laugh a certain way that doesn't feel good. And even I always try where it makes sense to imbue as much of myself, as Jourdán was saying, as much intelligence or motivation into these characters. But there's always a line that's like, ugh, if that line wasn't there, maybe we could like read this character a totally different way. But the line for Ilona is, I went to the library, how'd you like it? There were so many books. And the joke being, she's so dumb, she didn't know there were books in the library, right? And so I think we've all seen that line read a certain way, and it just makes me cringe to do that. So I try to find a different way to say it. So it's just an observation instead of a punchline, because to me, that isn't a punchline. And don't worry, Ilona is still hilarious in like so many other ways, but it always pissed me off when people laughed at that line, because something breaks inside you.
And I think you've been wonderful with the roles that I have seen you in or have worked with you in, where you bring so much of yourself, of your strong self into these characters and make them realistic characters rather than the stock characters or the type that they were meant to be when they were written. Jourdán, would you like to share your experience?
Sure. I'm going to slightly veer away a little bit, just because I'm going to talk about a filmic experience that I've had.
Please.
Because I feel that that also is representative, and it can be a little bit more insidious, because you get to for one thing, film examples are basically eternal. You have that, for all of posterity,
right?
And you get to see yourself in the way that people see you. And if it's not what you see as yourself, it could be quite a wake-up experience. So for me, I've been very blessed, particularly in the Bay Area, to be able to work, just work. But there was a time when that wasn't always the case, so I veered into film. And well, first I went to film conservatory in Burbank, California, and then we had a semester in Paris and a winter session. And so the first thing that happened to me then is the first thing they do with this particular conservatory is to type you. So you come in, right, you get accepted, you stand in the line. So they already start off, leading actor, character actor, leading actor, but it's usually like something more like character actor, leading actor. So, it's very rare that you get the character. The lead actor is always something that is supposed to be aspired to, but you already get pigeonholed. So that was the first thing that happened upon then. So, I immediately got the character actor because I was told I was not conventionally attractive. So that I would have to do works that were, I would have to go for character work. But for one thing, I think character roles are much more interesting to begin with anyway, but that's a whole nother story. But then secondly, when we would do, I kind of have and this goes back into kind of theater training, but I have kind of an adverse reaction to Meisner, because the first 3 weeks, that's all we did was Meisner, and we would do repetitions and stuff like that. And every time you had to do something, and then the instructor would have to call out your motivation. And no matter if I was trying to show joy or anger or sadness or fear, there's this, he would only call out aggressiveness. he was, every time I would do something, he was aggressive, aggressive, aggressive. Even if I'm like giving the biggest smile ever, it's aggressive. So that was already like the track that they were trying to put me on. And then upon actually attaining film roles, I literally only booked rapist roles. And the last time, the time that was the last straw for me was when I went in for this particular role. It was about a rape and rape survival, and I went in as the counselor, and I was being myself. And I'm a pretty easygoing, pleasant person, I would think. I was reading for the counselor, and they said, no, you're going to be the date rapist. And then we proceeded. I didn't meet the actress until the day of the shoot. 5 minutes after meeting her, we started the rape scene, and it was in 3 different locations. It was extremely graphic, and they had to excise the audio from it because it was just so graphic with the audio. And they even at one point we ended up putting a hole in the kitchen wall at one point, and like the final scene was shot under steps, and we were on top of the steps in this very graphic rape scene. And just the trauma of seeing that made me just kind of give up until I can figure out a way. And my teacher, what she told me was that I needed to either because I at one point I was extremely thin, and then I got adult onset asthma. So then I started taking steroids, and it bulked me up and made me my frame larger. So she told me I needed to get excessively thin or get super, super bulked, because if I'm in the mid-level with my frame and with my voice, I'm only going to get rapist roles or gangster roles or roles of that sort. So that being said, that's something that has kind of played out in theater, but at least with theater, especially with musical theater, there's a little bit more variety. My last role that I played was a role, Del Rey in Memphis. He's kind of a brute, but he's a brute with a heart. And so I was able to imbue more than just his prowess. He was also a very loving person.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience with us. It's so great to hear your perspective from a film artist as well, and not just theater. My experience mostly in theater, so this is so enlightening for me, and I hope for our audience as well. And what it sounds like to me, like for you already being pigeonholed into these roles, into these typecasts when you were in school, before you even reached the industry. That is just to call out that, the equity, diversity, and inclusion just doesn't happen within the industry. It needs to start in our training, our education system, in higher ed. I find it very disappointing that the majority of the colleges around here in the San Francisco Bay Area still have full white faculties. Being an educator myself, like that just mind-blowing to me, because how are you going to serve a community of very diverse population and from, with an all-white faculty from the old ways where they were, how they were trained and brought up and in the industry. So that's constantly something that I'm pushing for as well. To make on a little more positive note, I would love for you to share how did you, for instances, for those instances or other, how have you been able to turn that around? How did you advocate for yourself? How were you able to combat those issues in the rehearsal room? And this is a piece that I'm very excited about because it ties into with advocacy. How do you advocate for yourself as an artist and as theater makers?
Well, I guess since you went last time I'll go. Well, I think one thing for sure, you have to be strategic. For me, one thing I did, particularly in the Bay Area, which I found to be very, very effective, is that I ventured into Shakespeare because that's not really expected of me just initially. And through Shakespeare, that's opened up a lot more opportunities. So instead of just seeing me as, you know, Delray, which I love, but then you can turn around and see me. I've played Bottom before in Midsummer Night's Dream, which was a hoot. You know, and I've gotten to do plenty of the comedies, but also just being able to stand up for yourself, which was not some. I will admit, I don't think that it was as easy pre George Floyd and, you know, I See You White America and The Living Document. It wasn't as easy to advocate for yourself, but the tides are changing. I view I wasn't born in 1968, but I view 2020 as 1968 part 2, where it's just so many different incidents and so different movements happening in that last year that brought sweeping change. And it was and so with 2020, I think that we've kind of put a fire under the feet on the coals, and the companies, they have to bring diversity now, and things that were not necessarily the norm are becoming the norm. And so now I think that once the theater's opening up, we can say that feels a little racist, or I feel uncomfortable saying that, and not feel like it's going to put us at risk of not being hired anymore, or being told that we are difficult. And I know for myself, that's not as much of a problem, but I know for a fact that with my BIPOC sisters, a lot of time whenever they speak up and they say things, or when they advocate for better conditions or any of this, they're viewed as difficult or as divas, when really you know, it's something that's praised. You know, nobody looked down on Patti LuPone, for example, for her rant about the cell phones. But, you know, if it had been Audra McDonald, it might have been another story. So just having that agency now, I think, is a one big way.
Jessica?
One way to advocate for yourself to break through stereotypes is to bring it into the audition and the callback. So for a character like Ula, who has typically been played very dumb in the producers, in the callback, I play her as she's sort of the villain who's pulling the strings and is smarter than the men, and she's just playing dumb. And I bring that to the callback. And if I don't get to do that in the show, if the director doesn't want to see that, then they don't cast me, but I come with that. So that's one way. But I've also been cast in things where I didn't know I was going to be asked to do something that I didn't want to do. In particular, for Rock of Ages, I was cast as Regina, who is the activist, environmentalist hippie who I was so excited to play. But then I wasn't informed until orientation that I would be playing Candy, the transgender stripper, which I was not okay with. Which I wasn't okay with because it's only portrayed as a joke. And the joke is that this woman who is masculine isn't sexy, basically. I can't actually tell you what the joke is because it's not a good joke. It's like the most boring, lame bit. But bottom line, it's transphobic. And So I said I was uncomfortable playing that, and got a little pushback from the director that if they'd known, then I wouldn't have been cast in the role. And I was like, that's not great because it's such a small bit. So like, why is that even a consideration? And indeed, they deemed it so small a consideration that it wasn't in the callback and it wasn't in the cast list. It didn't even come up. But after a lot of soul searching, I was like, well, no, I absolutely I can't do it. And if I'd been told I had to do it, I think I would have walked. It didn't come to that in this case. But, just doing a gut check and things like that. If something feels racist or sexist or transphobic in the script, and you're like, oh, I'm not sure, just ask someone. Ask me, I'll tell you. Yeah, yes, that shit is in fact transphobic. Let's cut it. Or
Right.
Yeah.
It won't age well is what I use. I usually look back and say 20 years from now, with the 5 years from now, from the direction we're going, if I look back, would I be proud playing this character? And if the answer is no, then you need to speak up. I wanted to touch a little bit on the aspects of self-advocacy. Thank you so much, Jourdán, for bringing up the fact that yes, thank God, the whole movement that we're a part of, and hopefully we are at the forefront, or strive, at least I strive to be at the forefront of this, is speaking out. There's so much taboo of the culture where we're trained to say yes. We're trained to, yes, we don't want to be the difficult actors in the room, and I read a quote that says, a lot of times difficult to work with equates to harder to take advantage of. And I thought, wow, what a different way to look at the culture that we are a part of. And so I always push for actors, for artists, all of us, to kind of speak out when something's wrong. 9 out of 10, there are other people in the room who also feels the same way. They just don't want to speak out, and no fault to them, right? So a lot of times I'll take the bullet. Fine, I will never work with this company, so what, right? But change will come only if somebody speak out, or else I just think everything is fine and dandy. And another point I wanted to bring up is if a cast member comes forward to the creative team or your company and says, hey, I'm not comfortable with this, it is your responsibility. It is your job to make them feel comfortable putting what you're asking them to do on stage. That is your responsibility. It is not okay to say, oh, that just do it, or you can sit out, or no, deal with it. This is your job. This is your responsibility. So yes, I encourage everybody to speak out and get people on your side if you can. With the more voices, the better. But a lot of times, I just don't really care anymore. I just kind of speak how I feel and hope that will start at least a conversation where change can happen. And I'm always pushing for action. We can sit around and talk about all day about the things that are unfair and unjust and stereotypes and all that. But I hope that we are all coming out of this with some sort of an action plan, that if in the future something like this happened, we're going to step up and say, hey, that's not okay, or this is how it is, and you might not see it this way, but this is from a person from being part of that community. I can tell you that this is not okay. This is great. Thank you so much. I want to bring up the next point,
Wait,
which
Vinh,
is, oh yes, please.
I want to say that that when making, maybe I've been really lucky, but when making choices to break stereotypes in certain characters, I got to say, I haven't really gotten any pushback. Like, first of all, we're all doing the same shows. They've all been done a million times. So if you're making a choice and doing something new and different that, also happens to feel more real, more three-dimensional, more current, it might be an easier choice to make than you think. Like, you may not even have to convince people to let you do it. You may just get to do it.
Thank you so much. What a solution.
Just try it out.
The other point is, and which brought me to this point, is getting more diversity in the room, right? I think a lot of times, gosh, what would it be like for you to have other people in the room who are keeping an eye on all of these things that are insensitive, that are racist, that are sexist? Like, somebody in your creative team should speak out, like, have more people to be on your side to help you make those decisions. And that's not just in the rehearsal room. That is your director of education. That is your marketing director. That is your, board. Like, have more diversity. More people are going to look out for you and for your company to make everybody feel more welcome and included. Yes, Jessica.
Some young people, grab some Gen Z. They'll tell you if it's racist. They know.
Yeah, and I don't think that I'm basically an ambassador for the company, so I can I'm not throwing them under the bus. I'm just being transparent. But I think that was a large conversation with my company that I'm board of directors for, Marin Shakespeare, because in 2019, for their 30th season, they did their first production that had all actors of color in 30 years. And there were a lot of problems on this set. There were a lot of problems with just trying to understand that Africa is not monolithic. You can't set something in Africa, that's literally like setting something in America where, or, in South America, is it in Brazil? Is it in Colombia? And so that was a lot of the conversations, and with the We See White of America, and then with the living document, which really just blew things wide open, where people finally had a voice where we had not had voices before. It really caused the people behind the scenes at Marin to really say, we need to look at this again. And that was when the creation of the BIPOC Council came, and when they started to add, African American board members, and which I believe may have been the first board members in the creation. And through it's been a lot of growing pains, and we've lost 3 of the board members thus far of the 5, but that's because change it doesn't come easy, as we sang in Memphis. And so with growing pains, but as long as the companies are willing to have an open ear and to go through the mud, then we'll all come out better. But it's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to be a lot of looking at retraining the mind and really looking and examining one's privilege.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I don't think there's any any company out there who says we don't want equity, diversity, and inclusion. We all want it, but it's difficult. I will have to admit, it's challenging work. It's hard work. And I think it's about, again, bringing more people with those lived through experiences into your company, and let them and their experience and their perspective permeate through your company. It's not forming an EDI committee and let them do the work. Most of the time, they're also BIPOC and women of color who have had an additional burden placed on them. No, you need to just hire more staff and creative staff and directors and choreographers that are going to come in and tell the story authentically and tell their story, rather than, no, we want to do Memphis, we're going to get some Black actors in here and just do it. No, that's not how it works. We need to be part of your company and not just guests in your white institution, right? And then what about like that one BIPOC token show, and then we're back to the rest of the white season, right? And I think you mentioned you recognize the importance of the living document and the demand list. I think those are crucial points in our things that are happening right now, and I think it lends, like you said, lends a voice for people who were voiceless before without fear of retaliation. I wanted to bring up a point that is very, very current right now in New York. There is a huge movement of that came out of Scott Rudin and the whole AEA thing, Actors Equities Association. And I think it's kind of comical, kind of ironic that equity is in the name of the Actors Union, and it has been not very equitable when it comes. I wanted to point out that if you don't, for those of you who don't know, the Actors Equity Association is the professional union for actors and stage managers. Stage managers have not been included in the conversation, as well as, people are questioning right now in the New York scene. Protests are happening, demanding action, transparency. This whole year, a lot of people have not been working, yet they still have to pay their dues. So they want to know where that money is going to. I also want to acknowledge that a lot of the very few equity contracts here in the Bay Area go to older white men. And everybody, I know I'm on the cusp of joining equity. And I don't want to join because I know I will not be hired because the roles that are out there don't fit me, or I don't fit them. So that's another push for directors and houses, theater companies to kind of reevaluate the works that are being put out there and what kind of voices they're amplifying. Would you like to contribute that conversation about what's happening right now?
Well, I want to say I learned the hard way because I was supposed to turn equity with my next show that got canceled. Well, it got pushed to 2022 due to COVID. And then, so there was another production that I was supposed to be a part of, and they were expecting me to be non-equity, but it was going to be because I got the contract. And I got the contract, but I think the rule is with the EMC program that if you were EMC, once you turn equity, you can't do non-equity work. Like if you had been pre-cast, you can't do it. And so this particular company wanted me really badly for a show, but they wanted me to only be able to work as non-equity. And so with the totem pole, they had equity contracts, but they had to go through, like you said, the older white men, older white females. And then, so at that point, they had given up all their equity contracts. And although they really wanted me for a major part in this production, they had to turn me down because of the fact that they just didn't have any more contracts left. And I just think, as far as what's happening in New York, I think that, it's finally time. The tides have been turning since before, with the Me Too movement and Time's Up, and now with Black Lives Matter. And it just has created an atmosphere where just the old regime and just the old way of thinking has to go, and there's no place. And everybody feels emboldened to speak up now. So with the whole incident with not only with Scott Rudin, but with the director who was emailing him, talking about Karen Olivo, and was doing it so boldly in an open space, and somebody was able to read the email and illuminate that, and he had to step down too, because the tides are changing, and everybody just has to go with it at this point. It's no use in trying to fight the wave, because there's more, because of the fact that in the last few years, I mean, there are more voices out there. So with there being more voices out there, it means there are more roles now. It's not just, as much as Tennessee Williams is one of my favorites. It's one of my two favorite. I love Tennessee Williams and August Wilson, but it's not just Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller. There are more works. There's Dominique Morisseau and Terrence Alvin McCraney, and so there are new voices, and because of that, people have to get with Emmanuel Miranda, and you have to get with the fact that you can't just have all lily white seasons on Broadway anymore. It's just not going to happen anymore. So people are going to have to kind of go with the change, whether they like it or not.
What an exciting prospect and exciting challenge for our industry to be going through right now. Jessica, go ahead, please.
I want to ride that wave with Jourdán, and I just hope that community theaters can also feel empowered to fight back against possible licensing restrictions. I know we're here to talk about how as actors we can break stereotypes, but sometimes the text is there, right?
Yeah.
Or there's an entire racist song,
Yeah.
or worse. And I think it's probably time to step up and say, we're not going to do the show, or, try to not say it and get away with it. And then when licensing comes to you and says, no, you have to do it, just tell them no. If we all tell them no.
Yeah.
I want to say that it's not probably time, Jessica, it is the time. It is the time, right? And, a point that I wrote down that I wanted to say is that if the script that you're using is inherently racist or problematic, you better know how to fix it. You better have a solution for it before you put it in your season. Right? Don't be backpedaling and oh, shoot. Oh, that one little problem that we knew we were going to encounter. Yeah. Now we have to deal with it. Right? If you can't do it safely and genuinely and respectfully, maybe reconsider something else, or have more people who are creative, who are experienced and creative and capable of coming in and fixing those issues, working around it, looking at it from a different lens, perspective, point of view, whatever, to make it. An example is The King and I recently, the recent revival. Bart Shearer came in and revamped the whole production that made it respectful, that made it about making the Siamese culture the dominant culture, and the white woman coming in as a subdominant culture.
Mm-hmm.
What? You know what I mean? And that's the kind of work that I'm interested in as a director and as a person of color, as an artist. That's the work that excites me, and that's the direction that Broadway needs to go, and which in turn will filter into community theater. But in a way, I also think community theater has more, at risk. We have less money. I don't know. We just have more opportunities to do that. And, if we can't do it here, where else are we going to be able to do it? Right.
I guess first of all, you are absolutely right about probably. I don't know why I was hedging. But if you're, sorry, I just want to tell everyone that I broke my fast for Ramadan on camera. I just had iftar in front of all of you, and so my brain is still catching up. Jourdán, if you had something, then you should go.
Okay. I do want to say to one of your opponents that if this, let's be real here. If a licensing company sees a problem with something, they will change it, and that it goes back to that, because I think of an example very recently. I can't think about it without laughing, although it's very egregious. But due to Hamilton's their specifications about, preferring to have, I don't think he said preferred, he said that the cast had to be people of color. And so riding off of that, there was a school in Ohio who did this play by Katori Hall called On the Mountaintop, and it's about Dr. King's last night on Earth.
And with the white cast?
Well, no, it was a black cast, but
okay. I remember reading something about that. I was like, what?
But they had Dr. King be a white man.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so Dr. King was a white man, and Katori Hall herself had and licensing wrote in and said that is not acceptable. So at this point, it's up to the licensing companies of these problematic shows to say, okay, this was on par with the time and with the time, but now we're in a different time, and it's not just about the disclaimer of, oh, you have to look through this through the lens of the time. I'm quite frankly I'm fatigued from that. Just as a Black actor, and just having to have been in shows and I understand the importance, but I mean, we're just getting real here, but just how the emotional effect that happens every time I have to be called a nigger on stage. And I understand that it's important, but sometimes it's not always necessary. It's not, there are other ways to go around it. Sometimes it's very important to the scene. I recently did a talk with Latinx Mafia, and I was saying about the fact that I think the challenge with the BIPOC actor is that we oftentimes have to get into, we experience trauma in real life, and then when we escape, theater is this escape. Like, that was the whole point of theater coming into existence, is a way to provide catharsis and escape. But when we escape into these worlds of even more trauma. We revisit all of this trauma, and then oftentimes we are, especially particularly BIPOC actors, whatever our assigned racial slur is, it's thrown, as an Asian. I'm sure you've experienced that as well, Vinh, in some shows where people just throw these epithets, and then you have to build an extra strong relationship with the actors behind the scene, because of the fact that the person has to realize that this is a role. But it would be nice if there were more BIPOC stories that showcase the joy.
Yes.
Because I mean, we experience a lot of trauma, but we also rich in culture and have so much joy. And the only real, like, off the top of my head, the only real like fluffy show that I can think of as a BIPOC actor that's off the top of my head right now would be like The Wiz, and that's based off of a non-BIPOC story. So
one show.
Yeah, exactly.
One show that's not about Black trauma.
Right. And meanwhile, every other show, I did, one of my favorite roles was To Kill a Mockingbird, and I would have to go into break as Tom Robinson. I would have to look at lynching images and listen to Negro spirituals and things to get into this very traumatic place that I was getting into, and it's taxing. It's taxing, and I don't want to continue to have to look at things through the lens of the time. I want to just have things be less problematic, if possible.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Sorry. One thing, and then Jessica, you're absolutely right. BIPOC people and other people from marginalized communities, we're so much more, our stories are so much more than just our trauma. And that's a point that's been made before. And I think it's a beautiful point that, yes, and if you are doing shows that are reigniting these painful pasts, why are you doing it? You have to weigh out the impact that it has. If it's educating, if it's moving the industry in the right direction, then yes. But if it's just for the joy of, entertainment of white people, maybe we need to reconsider if we want to do these shows. And I love to the point again to, responsibility for theater company, especially at the regional level, where you have a little more weight to say, contact those regional houses. We're talking about TheaterWorks and ACT and like all the big names, La Jolla Playhouse, in San Diego, and the Rep and all that. You have to wait, contact those theater companies, those houses, and say, hey, this is not okay, rewrite this. Or if we all speak up collectively, they have to change. And I hope they want to change, because not just because to move with the time, but it's the right thing to do. Come on, right? It's just, it's exhausting. You're right. And I want to acknowledge again that today we're so grateful. I'm so grateful and thankful to be having this conversation with you again, because I'm sure you've spoken on this many, many times. But I hope that there are many audiences are hearing this maybe at the first time, or just another reminder that yes, this is still an issue that we are dealing with. I'm at a point in my career where I am comfortable enough to turn away. I have the luxury and the privilege of turning away roles that are offensive to me. Luke and John, the roles in Millie, like those kind of roles where I'm like, no, I don't want to perpetuate this stereotype. But I can imagine younger actors where they might not have that privilege, where they need those opportunities to put on their resume. And so I want to acknowledge that privilege. But that is something that I'm constantly work with and advocating for people who can do those shows better, or just more new works and better works to be done. Jessica, please. Thank you.
In a vacuum, we maybe wouldn't be complaining about some of these roles or some of these shows. Like, a lot of them are stories that deserve to be told, but the problem is that there are so few of them. And so we're missing out on the joy, or we're missing out on the full spectrum of the rest of human experience, right? For the most part, we're just seeing this one perspective. And so when you're in the fourth show in a row where you're the only woman, the only named female character, and it's always the same type, like, it's not like, I love those women, but I also want to do other things. Like, it's just so much more, as fun as it is to, you make it a game to see how you can fix them, but it's so much more fulfilling to play roles where you don't have to force yourself into them. You can see more of yourself in them. And yeah, but also, we are so lucky to even have stereotypes to fit into, right? To have roles where people do see us, because there are not lesbian roles, there are not trans roles, there aren't Arab or Muslim roles. My husband is Egyptian American and Muslim, and he has been doing theater all his life. And for the very first time in 2020, he got to play an Arab character on stage. Just like, that's so wild. We need more stuff. These new works, Jourdán.
Yes, we look to you. Another burden upon your shoulders to create new works. I think at this time, I would love to have Sarah come back, and she's been monitoring the chat. I was just trying to not look at the chat and focus on you two, but love to have Sarah back. And please, is there any question in the chat that we can illuminate on?
Thank you, guys. And yes, everything's been very resonating. And one of the things, musical theater itself is based off of stereotypes. It's based off of vaudeville. It's based off of minstrel shows. Those in turn were based off of commedia dell'arte from the 1700s. All of it really grounded in tropes, and you have 2 minutes to explain to an audience what they're seeing. So that's, that, not to defend stereotypes, because one of the things we're talking about is how to switch this, but that is where some of these, historically, how it's been going. Jessica.
Earlier when you said it's a good and easy way to introduce a character, I wanted to push back that no, it's just an easy way to introduce a character.
Yes, absolutely.
And when we're talking about these historically based stereotypes, that still doesn't apply to the white men, because there is more than one white male character in all of these shows. So they are therefore not stereotyped down to one, like distilled into one stereotype.
Beautiful.
And we can do better.
We can do better because we deserve better, is what I always say. Yeah.
100%. And I think everybody will find, there were a couple of comments in the thing, we talked, when we did our pre-conversation, we talked about females that are robust and deeper voiced, and getting the roles that I would be cast as are generally given to males. It's Edna in Hairspray, it's the Cinderella's ugly stepsisters. Those type of roles that I would love to play are generally played by for the humor of it, for men.
No, for the humor of it.
For the humor of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm funny. Really. Yeah.
Me too, lady.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have been cast in my lifetime as one of the stepsisters, the Cinderella stepsisters. So I can definitely attest to that.
It is. So I'm just going to look through. There's such great comments. My people in the chat, you are deeply appreciative of just these thoughts. And hang on. So we wanted to talk just a little bit about, so what else can we do? We've talked, one of the hardest things is, how do we take a show and flip it on its edge to retell that story? Jessica, one of the reasons that you popped to mind first to join us for this talk is about Ilona and the take that you brought with her. That was a decision that talk us through how you and Martine kind of worked on that role, if you would.
Well, I mean, it's about pulling together a full 3-dimensional backstory for a character and thinking about what their life actually is, and then figuring out why they're saying certain lines and reconciling the backstory with the lines. So for her, like, Ilona is the calculator. She's the cashier. She's the money woman. She runs that shop. So for her to be an idiot doesn't actually make any sense. That's projection of the playwright onto that character. Like, she's not actually dumb. So that was clear to us from the beginning, as well as Martine being, from the callback, he was very insistent that Ilona and Amalia were both real people who were going to be friends. And the story is really about those women. So he was very, very supportive in pulling that together. And I also, this is on topic, but also maybe not, but I just want to give Martine credit. I get a lot of kissing roles that I could also call that my stereotype in theater. And they have basically all been with white dudes until She Loves Me last year. That's my first real interracial kiss on stage, was with my lovely Carlos playing Kodai, who's Mexican American. And that was Martine pushing for that. And as you know, I'm in an interracial marriage, and for that to be the first time that came up in my theater life. That was really nice to have. And that's just, that's casting choices and just making things fit. We can do better.
Yes.
Just think bigger.
I wanted to add to that is that, a lot of times I hear the pushback that like, well, there's nobody that showed up. That's why the shows are always white. That's why you've always had to kiss white men, because there's no people of color. And I can guarantee you that is not the case here in the Bay Area. The theater community here is so diverse. It's just you as directors and producers not being creative enough to view these actors in the way that they should be, giving them the credit and the environment and the nurture to do what they do. And to say, oh, there's nobody that showed up there for an all-white cast is a very lazy excuse, and it doesn't stand anymore. So I hope that's you mean all the things that you were talking about, Jessica, with like the things that, oh my gosh, that they're a real human being, you and Amalia are friends, like those things are common sense. Right? They're like, as a director, as a creative artist, that's your job. You're creating characters. And if you can't, then why are you directing? Like, to be a little blunt, right? You get to be in the art form where you can imagine what the world can be.
Yeah.
And so that's also comes with a lot of responsibility.
I know there's a number of people that are in kind of on boards or in management positions listening tonight. And I can tell you that one of the things that Vinh and I have worked incredibly hard on over the past year is inviting people to your auditions. It's not that hard. It's scary at first. It was hard. But really just reaching out and saying, hey, you know what? Your name came up. We'd love it if you would consider submitting for the show or being seen for the show. It's not a promise. And from my experience, everybody is very appreciative that they were thought of, that they felt reached out to, even if you can't give them the role. So that is one thing that I think we've made huge progress. We all spoke a little bit about the traditional musical theater not going to go anywhere. As much as we'd love to say we're not doing Andrew Lloyd Webber anymore, it is still will be in the rote of theater companies. I know for myself, because I'm doing it and looking for new works. Those are incredibly hard to produce for the first time. I assisted on one many years ago, and when you're a staff of one or you're an all-volunteer community theater, that's a hefty challenge. What I can say is that when we are considering the shows for our coming season, it is looking at them and saying, is this for everybody? Can anybody play these roles? And that's something that is driving our season selection committee. And if not, why would we choose to tell that story?
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a reason, we need to educate our audience about why we've chosen to do what we've presented.
Mm-hmm.
Those of you who have maybe read more licensing agreements than I, are there often rules saying that you cannot put actors of color in traditionally white roles? I would think no.
I have never seen a person of color called out. You absolutely do have to get permission for genders. So if we were to
and how hard is that?
It just depends on the rights house. Unfortunately, from you, Vinh said earlier, it's the regional level has much more pull than small community theaters. We get a rubber boilerplate, but there is movement. Oregon Shakespeare Festival recently did the Oklahoma with the two gender swapped Ado Annie and Curly were. And so I think as long as we keep banging drums and saying, I would like to do this show with this change.
Mm-hmm.
And if we keep asking, change takes time, it will be slow, but things will shift.
Yeah. But
And I mean,
but there are some shows where we have been able to do that, right? And so getting people to the auditions and then also casting them in perhaps unconventional ways, that's a start. But we also need to be supportive of those actors if they're doing gender bend or more color conscious casting. And I let's see, I do have a specific example from SBMT, which I hope is okay because I talked to him about this when it happened. But for 1776, y'all did a sort of gender open casting, not for all roles, but for many roles, which was great and a great idea. And you did end up casting a lot of women in roles that were traditionally played by men. But the musical keys were still in the male range. So for instance, I was called back for Richard Henry Lee, which is this wonderful bravado number about just like kicking ass. And I also auditioned at Tabard for that and sang the song, and it was so fun to sing just like super belty and felt great. And then at SBMT was provided music in the male key, which is super low and doesn't feel vibrato or doesn't feel bravado-y at all. And I even offered to provide the sheet music that I still had from the other all-female audition and was told no. And just singing that song, "My name is Richard Henry Lee," down here, there's no way I could pull off the character. And, the wonderful actor, David Mitzer, who ended up with it, did such a great job. And this isn't a complaining about that, about casting, but if you do want to provide opportunities for women and people of color to play roles that they don't traditionally get to play, then you also need to support them through the process.
I wanted to add to, go ahead, Jourdán.
And to that point, it's kind of, I appreciate new works, of course I do, but then as an actor and as an artist who's grown up watching this stuff, I have, I think it's only fair to those of us who've grown up and have dreamed of these established roles. Finally there was a Black Valjean, or and just being able to, or and I get that sometimes it doesn't fit in with the storyline. Like one day, if only I could do my brain isn't working, but in Cabaret, the main character, not Sally, but the
MC.
The MC.
Yes, my brain isn't working. The MC. Yes. Like, that would just be so much fun. I understand it's like in 1930s in Germany, and but you could. There is a historical aspect to that because there, in addition to the Jews. The Jewish people, but there were also, with the homosexuals were targeted at the time, and there were Blacks that were targeted at the time too. And a lot of times that's something people don't know, that Blacks, all kinds of people exist at any given time.
Yes, yes.
And I was surprised to learn, because it wasn't my experience, but I was surprised to learn because my cousin Jourdán D, wonderful actor in the area, we were cast in Scrooge in Love at the last minute at Moon, and apparently when the living document came out, apparently somebody it was said that somebody had said something about it not being believable that, you know, there would be Black people in England in the 1800s. But I mean,
I'm gonna like take my earrings off and
right.
just like,
I mean,
Black people have existed throughout history, around the world.
Exactly.
Like, do your homework, do your research. Yes, there should be a Black Valjean, an Asian Christine, and like, and also, I'm gonna push further. Theater is make believe. Come on, people. It just gets me so fired up.
Yeah, exactly. It's so upsetting. But then it becomes very difficult when you bring the conversation to the other end, when people say things like, well, why can't we have an all white Color Purple, for example? I mean, Germany did do that, by the way, and it's hilarious, but there was a German production, and it's very, but you know, it becomes a very difficult conversation if you don't understand that there's a lack of roles. And so with these mainstream stories, it's only fair to represent the full spectrum of people that would be in this storyline. Like, there were Black people in France during Les Mis. There should be a great amount of people who you know, who were in the trenches and you know, fighting, and it just needs to be more representative.
So what I will say to that is, oh my God, yes, and so many things. Bridgerton, look at Bridgerton. Oh my God, it's like skyrocketing. Like, the popularity is crazy out there. And I think a great deal of that is because of the diversity of it, because you're bringing in a new generation of audiences where they can see themselves in these roles in this situation. And the thing that you said about, well, why can't we do an all Black or all white cast of Color Purple? Hello, it doesn't work like that. And it's not reverse racism. Like, think of the opportunities, that the roles that are out there and the shows that are out there in the white canon versus what there is for people of color, and to have more opportunity taken away from those communities is just not right. You have to look at the history of oppression, the history of discrimination, you know, to say, oh, no, I'm just going to say no right there. It doesn't work like that. Okay.
Vinh, I was totally going to bring up Bridgerton. I mean, I would have thought that Brandy Cinderella was going to change the world, but here we are. But yeah, ride that wave, Bridgerton. And if you haven't
nobody questioned Cinderella when it came out. We're just like, cool, love that. And then I was surprised that it kind of went away. Like, there was nothing that like came after that. And now I was recently watching on Disney Plus, and I was like, this sounds like it's the cast of today, right? Like, that's how, you know, yeah, the world caught up. Sorry, I got a little fired up there.
I'm going to tack on, Doug just put something in the comment that I think is so wonderful. And let us be guided by the mantra that storytelling is the willing suspension of disbelief.
Yes.
That anything is possible on the stage, and any stories. There is that saying of, what if our audiences cannot handle that? I think these days most of them can. They just have to open their eyes and open their ears and, you know, see what's all around them. I actually don't think that there would be any, maybe so minuscule in what is represented on stage. And I think it's coming at it really with an open heart, with a sense of belonging, accountability, things that we've all mentioned, you know, here tonight. So I can't wait to see how the landscape changes over the next year, 2 years, 5 years. It takes time. Patience. But yeah, I love these conversations, to keep this going, to keep educating and keep sharing the stories. I'm so grateful and appreciative.
I wanted to add a point about the audience member. Don't insult your audience with thinking that they won't be able to understand what you put on stage. Like, give your audience credit. Like, senior centers, like, oh my gosh, like we're changing the world through that, right? Like I give them the opportunity to see the world differently, and the audience are more intelligent and more receptive than you think. And what a wonderful opportunity for us as artists to have that privilege to do so. So take them up on it. Don't. I think it's yeah.
Can I just say something
Yes.
quickly? So, because I saw something flash for 1 second, I do understand the concern. I can't find it, but I know that one person was saying that the fear is that that with the push for diversity, that if things with the push for diversity, that it might leave out like, for example, WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant people. And I do get that. But the thing is, though, oftentimes, especially within the Bay Area, it's been my experience that if you have one show of Sweeney Todd, you have 3 other shows of Sweeney Todd at the same time, in the area. So if one show might have gone a different route and gone non-traditional, and for me, that's kind of been what I've had to do. Like, I live in San Francisco, but I'll do shows in San Jose and in Santa Rosa and in Sacramento to go where the parts are. And so it's my experience that a lot of times in the season, the same show will be done multiple times. And although one opportunity might be taken away, there are other opportunities. It might cost a little gas money.
You answered that. I wanted to get onto that point, and you answer it so diplomatically. What I will say is that, to that point, is that don't think of it as a pie. More for us doesn't mean less for you. It's just expanding the table and inviting more people to tell their stories, to have their stories and their experience be told. So there will always be a plethora of white stories to tell. And so I would never look at it. I would encourage you to look at it from there's always going to be opportunities for you. If you're saying, I'm white, therefore I haven't had, my opportunities are less, put yourself in the perspective of people from marginalized communities. They have never had that experience before, so it is a great time to just sit back and let things happen. I think it's okay to do that, to amplify other communities' voices. We're all fighting in the same directions. Don't think that more for one group is less for the other. It's not a pie. That's what I usually say. And then for people who are giving individual instances and questions, I would just say that it's a case by case. That's my kind of answer to that, is everything is a case by case. Every director is going to approach a show differently. It also is with the population that we're serving. Who's going to show up? Who can we outreach to? There's so many elements that goes behind casting and putting on a show, that to say, well, what about this case? What about this case? You just have to deal with it as you go along. And the industry is changing. EDI is equity, diversity, inclusion standards are changing. So instead of looking for a blanketed thing to solve all your problems, think of it as a new challenge that you have to tackle each day, which keeps us on our feet. All right.
No, that was, perfectly summed up. And unless, I think I've been kind of scrolling through all of the questions. I think we've touched on pretty much all of them that are, I don't know, Vinh, if you could read the one that Doug just posted, that'd be great. I can't talk and read at the same time.
Sure.
Not that talented. I think we've pretty much touched on a lot of the questions that had been answered through the chat. And if there are, if we haven't, I do suggest, you feel free to reach out. If you're in a situation from a perspective of someone who is a producer, please reach out if you've want the management to reconsider something. Sometimes, believe it or not, we try to look at things with a wide vision. However, sometimes not everything is apparent. but in general, most everybody that I know, directors, producers, are trying their best and wanting to make respectful, considerate decisions. And if they're not, then we don't want to work with them anymore.
Yes. Thank you for saying that, Sarah. Thank you for saying that. Because
yes, if you don't have a no work list, are you even doing it right?
I don't know, but I do know that Cabaret jumped to the top of my list, Jourdán, because he said he'll drive down to South Bay.
Oh,
well, if you could just sign here and here and here right now, that'd be great.
And to answer Doug's question, because he posed it to you and I, to Vinh, but as far as I mean, a mixture of both. I would prefer to have roles that represent my experience, but also I would also further would like to have the freedom to do other roles that are not necessarily when they were written in 1937 or in 62 didn't have me in mind, but I can absolutely play.
Right. So keeping your mind open to the roles that the shows that you want to highlight a specific community or uplift a specific community, but also keeping your mind open that the rest of your seasons are also have that flexibility to include those voices. It's not just in that one particular show, but it is throughout your company, your culture, your culture, your philosophy as a theater company.
Mm-hmm. And to Jessica's point, it takes supporting throughout the whole process, because I think that's been a beauty. Again, one of the reasons why Tennessee Williams is one of my favorite playwrights is because I've been fortunate enough to see several examples of, like the all-black cat on the hot tin roof on Broadway, or the all-black streetcar named Desire. But obviously you have to take out certain, like you can't call, oh my God, if I could play Stanley Kowalski one of these days. But, you have to take out, certain, I don't know, like, when I saw it on Broadway, for example, they didn't redact the whole Polak reference. But I think Afam Shakespeare did that. I actually was lucky to be one of the last two in consideration for the role for Stanley. But Kari Moyer did a wonderful job. But they redacted that word. They didn't make any references to that. Although, there are Black Polish people as well. But a certain sensitivity to it, and I think there's maybe more freedom in straight plays as opposed to musicals. I don't know how the licensing goes with that, but just the support that Jessica was talking about, it has to be there throughout you can't have an actor out there feeling like a scene is unsafe for them for whatever reason. That's important.
And with that note, I hope that all of our audience, thank you so much for attending today. And I hope that you come away with something new, a different perspective, a different fire that's lit in you, and turn those thoughts, those ideas into actions. I call on you to make it happen. The best way to have diversity is just to do it. So talk to people, rile up a storm, speak out, whatever you need to do, advocacy. We need your voice. We need your allyship to help move everything in the same direction. So I just want to thank you again to our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your effort and your hopes and dreams and your trauma and your burden, all of those things. We are so appreciative. And I hope that by the time, theater comes back, it's a better world for us to all come back to.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Vinh, for moderating this program. We're super appreciative of you and all of your talents. So thank you very much.